Okay, so we're recording. There's quite a bit in Chapter 5. The chapter sort of focuses on some of the security features, some of the security measures for sharing files and on your network server. So we're going to look at that in some detail here. I'm kind of going to go through a couple of these activities, some of the ones that really are important. I think encrypting files is a really important activity to take a look at. So let's go ahead and do that. Oops. Oh, whoops, I just hit Control-Delete. Hang on a second. All right. Should be Control-Insert. Oops. So let's go ahead and take a look at encrypting your file system. So encryption is pretty beneficial in terms of storing data on a server. There's some rules with security if you've ever taken a security class or if you're going to take some of the security classes. And the main rule to think about when you're thinking about security is that if there is no physical security, then there is no security of any kind. So if you have no security for your server, meaning it's not locked in a room under lock and key in a place where it's not going to be able to be accessed, then you have, in a way, you have no security, because if somebody can access your system without any kind of preventative measures or things to prevent them from gaining physical access to your server, they can do all kinds of stuff to sort of get on there and make changes to stuff. So part of physical security is encryption. So encryption in Windows, it's not available in the very old versions of Windows, but ever since Windows NT and the introduction of NTFS as a file system, encryption is an integral part of that. And the same thing is true for folder permissions. So when you set folder permissions, that's also a part of security. That's not as much related to physical security as encryption is, but that's also an important aspect of security. So this first lab, it has you encrypt a file that you would have created in a previous lab. Let me pull it up here so that I can see it. 5-2. Okay. So the folder was created, yeah, it's under the documents. Oh, actually, I guess it has you do that as step 1. So you go into your documents folder, see users, oops, we're under administrator right now, and then documents, and you create a new folder and you name it your first initial and last name. So that's the first step completed. I think it has you now find a file to copy into the folder, such as a text document or file already in your root, blah, 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 and copy, open the folder you created and right click and paste. Okay, so we'll go into our root directory and we'll copy, where do we have something here? Well, it's a text file. I think you should have already created a text file in one of the previous labs. Actually, we could use this right here, just this right on the desktop, this file called backup. So, and we'll stick that right in here. And that's the first part of the lab done. Now, the next part is actually encrypting the files. So the way you do that is within the, the folder. So the way you do that is in the properties, under advanced, you see encrypt contents to secure data. So the compression and encryption, these attributes are also a product of the NTFS file system. NTFS, if you are not aware, is the file system used by Windows. You should have read that in the book by now. Hopefully you've been reading the book and keeping up with that. But compression and encryption are unique as far as the file systems used by Windows. They're unique to NTFS. So FAT32 and FAT16, which are the predecessors to NTFS, did not have the ability to compress or encrypt. So all those zip files that you have or I guess now, well, zip files are a different type, but compression as a way to save disk space is a feature of NTFS, not FAT32 in the previous Windows file systems. So we just check that box to encrypt and click OK. At that point is actually this point right here. Step 5 is where you would, I believe is actually right here. Step 4 is where you would take your screenshot. Let me verify that. So yeah, it says after completing step 5, which I guess is right here technically. I'd like to, maybe I'll change that for the next class, but right here is really where you should take your screenshot, where it says encrypt contents to secure data, so that I can see that you actually encrypted it. Then you click apply. Oh, okay, this is where it has you take a screenshot right here. So yeah, I guess either way, as long as it's somewhere in this vicinity that the screenshot is done, and then you would click OK there. You'll notice once we click apply and OK that the folder it's supposed to, maybe it only does it with this sub. Yeah, okay. So now it's got everything that is contained within that folder. You'll see a little icon. It's a picture of a lock on anything that's contained in there. And then now the folder is encrypted. If I were to copy this to a flash drive that also contains NTFS, it would remain encrypted. And there you have it. So yeah, it's supposed to appear green, but for some reason it's not here. So I'm not sure why. Maybe if we go back in, it will. That's what I was thinking. It was what it would, something that would do. Normally when you encrypt a file, for some reason it's not showing up green here, but when you encrypt a file in Windows, it appears green. So I don't know why it's not. But okay, there's a box within the control panel that needs to be checked for that. So we can actually do that right now. So view options, and we're going to go show encrypted in color. There we go. And so there you go. Now it shows up as green. You know it's encrypted. If I create another new folder in here, that's going to show up as black. And one is encrypted, the other is not. And anything contained within there will also show up as green if it's encrypted. So now we can go ahead and decrypt the file, and that's pretty much it. So you encrypt, then you decrypt. You encrypt, take a screenshot, and decrypt. So that's the first lab done. If you've done that, you're set. Pretty simple. Now let's move on. 5-3, configuring folder permissions, removing 5-4 is removing inherited permissions. 5-5, configuring advanced permissions. 5-7, enabling file and folder sharing permissions, or rather enabling file and folder sharing, configuring a shared folder, and configuring a shared folder using Server Manager. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you configuring folder permissions. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and enabling folder sharing. You guys can go through the labs for inherited permissions and advanced permissions on your own. But let's just go ahead and take a look real quick here at the security tab on this particular file. This is where you go to change permissions. If you're not familiar, permissions are sort of a gatekeeper. A good way of thinking about permissions is as a gatekeeper. This is part of security in Windows Server. So when you're configuring, for instance, a file sharing server, which you can do that even without a server OS. You can do that in Windows 10 or the client version of Windows, in whatever it is. But Windows Server gives you quite a few more options for how you share. But I'm just going to show you the basics. And part of sharing is configuring effective permissions. Now, there's two sets of permissions in in NTFS. Oh, hey, hey, how's it going there? I guess we have somebody else just joining. Marcia, is that you? I assume Marsh. Is that right? I don't see if you have a mic here. Anyway, you can talk to us in chat. Anyway, Marcia, we just went through the first lab thus far. We're about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes in. But I'm going through now looking at folder permissions in NTFS. So anyways, as I was saying, NTFS folder permissions are broken up into two different sort of options. There are remote permissions and there are local permissions. And so what we're looking at first is local permissions. That's what you configure on a folder that would basically be for the purposes of when you're on the server, the local server, signed in, what are your permissions if that's the case. So when we create permissions here, there's quite a bit you can do here, and you notice the disable inheritance button there. We're not really going to concern ourselves with that for now, but we can add permissions here. You would select a principal. Your principal is going to be who your target is for those permissions. So let's just go ahead and throw my other user account in there. And this, the permissions, the basic permissions in Windows are full control, modify, read and execute, list folder contents, read and write. There are quite a few special permissions, which I'll show you in just a minute. Actually, I guess I can show you now, but those are a little bit more than is necessary for the basic server class. It might delve into them in the book, but I'm just going to talk about the basic permissions in this, because that's what really is important. Full control permission, when you apply that permission to a principal, to a user or a group, that allows essentially everything prior, so everything up to full control. And well, I guess, let me pause there. Let me start back rather at read and write. So first of all, let's uncheck all of these permissions. When you have write permissions would not allow you to read any documents that are already existing within the folder that you're setting the permissions, but you could create new documents. Once you create a document, you can't do anything with it. You just have write privileges. So you can just add documents to the folder. You can't do anything else. The read permission, however, would allow you to also open documents and then create documents. Now, it does not necessarily give you the ability to edit any documents. That would require read and execute. Okay. So now list folder contents permission would allow you to see all of the files and folders within a directory. So for instance, if you have list folder contents, you have to have the read and execute permissions. So you can't have one without the other. So read and execute, if there is a document or for instance, an executable file, an exe file, you can actually open that and it will run on your computer. So if you have up to this point, you can do you can create and edit documents, but you cannot delete them. Modify is the permission that allows you to delete a document out of a folder. And then finally, full control, you have everything up to modify, but you also now have the ability to change permissions for other users. So full control is everything. You have all permissions. So I believe it even gives you all of the advanced permissions as well. So when you check full control, it gives you everything. As far as the special permissions, I'm not going to delve into those. You can uncheck the full control and have everything else checked, and that's essentially the same exact thing, because you notice you have read permissions and change permissions, as well as just delete permissions. Notice they get rid of modify when you go into these advanced permissions, okay, because modify includes delete. So let's just show you sort of what that looks like if you have modify checked. You notice it says delete there. I think, but if you have modify checked, you don't, and not full control, when you go to the advanced permissions, it does not have change permissions and take ownership checked. Okay, so that just, it's a limiting factor there. And then you can't delete subfolders and files. You could delete you could delete a primary folder, but you can't delete subfolders. So I guess you could sort of go through and do it that way. But anyway, in any event, that's the basic permissions. This is something that you'll kind of develop a feel for. There's a principle in security, another one besides if there is no physical security, there's no security. This principle is known as the principle of least security, which says essentially, I'm sorry, the principle of least privilege, not least security. So what the principle of least privilege says is it says that you want to limit a user's access to essentially what is the least amount that they need access to. So when you're developing permissions for users, you say, okay, I don't want to give them full control, obviously, if they're not an administrator of some kind, but they need to be able to read and write, and they need to be able to execute data within there. They don't necessarily need to be able to delete anything out of there. In fact, I definitely don't want them to have that permission. So we're just going to leave them right there. So that sort of falls into the principle of least privilege. So that's the gist of permissions. That's really all I'm going to delve into for now. So I'm not even going to change anything there. I just wanted to show you that. The other thing I want to show you is file and folder sharing. We're going to share a folder here. So we just went into the security tab and we played around in there. Now we're going to go into the sharing tab. So sharing, there's basically two ways you can do it from the sharing tab. There's a third way from Server Manager, but I'm just going to show you the first way, which is through the sharing wizard. The problem with this, I'll go ahead and go through and then show you what it sort of does. We're going to select a principal, once again, who we want to share it with. And in this case, again, principle of least privilege, only share a folder with the users to whom sharing is necessary. And then you select, then you set their permissions as well. So we'll show you that in just a minute. Remember, I mentioned there's two ways that permissions are configured. There is local and remote. We just looked at local. When you set sharing permissions, those are remote permissions. Okay, so let's go ahead and select a principal here with whom to share. Now you can do groups in there as well. I don't have any groups set up on this server, but at this point you can set the user's permissions. Read and write are the only options you're given at this point. So then you go ahead and click share, and it creates a share with a UNC path. So if you're not familiar, UNC path is written as // server name / share name all the way down to the subdirectory in this case. So because we didn't use, we used the sharing wizard, it automatically generates that name for us. Now I'm not a big fan of that method of sharing because it's so limited. But if you click on the advanced sharing button, check the box for share this folder. Notice it gives you a share name you can change, which is pretty cool. We can limit the number of simultaneous users. The maximum is 16,777,215, which, in case you're wondering, that is because of the fact that you can, you're limited to the maximum number of IP addresses in a Class A IP scheme. So if you're familiar with IP subnetting at all, you know Class A has 16,777,200. Actually, it's 214 to be more accurate. But it's a good plan to limit the number of shares to some level. Saying like 10 simultaneous connections is a good way of going. That's just going to prevent the server from being bogged down by a number of connections, and so it'll kick people who go above that number, or make them wait. You can put comments in here if you want to say why you're sharing it or who it's for, something to that effect. That's for administration purposes only. Now here's my favorite part. This shows you the sort of sharing permissions for remote. So remote permissions, remember I mentioned local and remote. These are the remote permissions. You have read, change, and full control. So read, of course, will it's essentially the same as the read permissions in normal local NTFS permissions. It allows you to take a look at the folder contents. It Same as, I guess it's the same as read and execute permissions. Read and execute gives you list folder contents. You can execute a file, you can open them, but you can't edit them and you can't delete them. Change would give you the same as modify permissions. Basically, you have everything up to read and execute. You can list, you can look at permissions, you can do all kinds of stuff, but you cannot change permissions for other users. Okay, where full control would then allow you to change permissions for the other users that are on, that are available in that file. So full control is something that you typically want to avoid unless you're setting up domain users or domain administrators, not just domain users, rather. The deny box, I'm not even sure why it's there. It's implicit. If you don't check allow, deny is implicit. Okay, so you can say, for instance, I guess if you could, I don't think you can even do that. Yeah, so at any level which you deny, it's going to deny everything below that. So if you allow read but deny change, it's going to deny read. So the deny box is sort of, I suppose you could deny, I guess it depends. Yeah, so if you could, there could be a situation where this would make sense. If you have multiple groups which a user belongs to, you could specifically deny one group, and it would the deny permission would overwrite the allow permission for the other group. So if there's a user that's in multiple groups, I don't know what situation that would apply to, but I guess the situation where this makes the most sense is where you're doing it with groups. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out. That's basically sharing in a nutshell. Of course, you can share from Server Manager as well, and we can, I guess we can look at that. So, oh, hey, Eric, welcome. We're actually getting pretty close to done here, but I just want to look at a few more things. So let's jump into Server Manager here real quick, and we'll share a file from Server Manager. Let's see. So you're going to use the, if we go back here to our dashboard, you're going to use the File and Storage Services snap-in. And can you see all right? Are you doing it on mobile, Eric?
Yes, I am doing it on mobile.
Can you see my my shared screen here okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. We're talking about Chapter 5 right now. I'm just kind of going through some of the more important topics. File and Storage Services for Windows. Okay, so you use the Shares button here. And then I believe it's New Share. Right click and say New Share. And it's kind of a wizard here. You can do, there's a lot of different options here in terms of how you do it, but using the quick share is pretty easy way of doing it. This is a great way of doing things if you have a lot of different shares that you want to set up. But let's go ahead and click through this. We're going to set a share name. I'm not sure what the lab has you do here, but in any event, I guess the lab does. Oh, I guess it has you look at one that you've already done. But yeah, it's going to create a file for you that's going to share, and then you can encrypt data access. That might be a good thing depending on the situation. Enable access-based enumeration. Not really crucial. Okay, this is where you would customize the permissions for that share. You could customize the local permissions, and it would allow those local permissions to then go to be remote permissions or something to that effect when you share it. So that gives you a little bit more control over permissions. Then you create the share. There it is. So that's doing it in Server Manager. If you create a share, for instance, let's go ahead and share this. We're going to change the share path. Dcutter 2 is fine. We'll set our permissions. Change. If you create a share like this, it should, if I'm not mistaken, it will add it to Server Manager. Once it reloads. Yeah, so there you go. And it shows you the location. You can even change some settings here if you want. Set permissions, customize them, whatever. So that's using Server Manager for file sharing. I'm not usually a big fan of doing things that way. I think it's more limiting. I really like creating the folder wherever I want it to be, and then using the sharing tab and the advanced sharing button within the sharing tab. All right, so what else? Let's see. 5-10, publishing a shared folder, troubleshooting permissions. Okay, disk quotas. Disk quotas is a really, really, really handy tool when you're setting up a file sharing server. It's pretty common for users to overuse, let's put it that way, when it comes to the storage space on a server. And so quotas are a very, very handy thing to do when you have a domain. You say, okay, we want to set up file share where users can, they can add things and remove things and do whatever they want within their own share. For instance, I guess Yavapai College does something to this effect. When you sign into one of the Yavapai College Commons computers, they have a file sharing server which you can store your data on. And what they do in order to prevent users from coming in and overusing the servers for storage is they set a disk quota. So quotas give you quite a few options, but you would go into the disk which you're sharing from, and then so this computer obviously doesn't have more than one, but it's, let's say, which in this case we are sharing from the C drive. When you set that quota, enable quota management button, you select your limit here, 15 gig, let's say. And you can set this little warning level. This is handy because it'll warn the user and say, hey, you're approaching your limit. We could set that to 14 gig, or we could even say like 14.9 gig. You're approaching your limit at 14.9 gig. Now, you can create a log event when the user hits their quota so that you can email them and say, hey, you hit your quota, you might want to delete some stuff. Or you can set a same kind of thing, log event when the user exceeds their warning level, so you can email them and say, hey, you're going to run out if you're not careful. This is where the log entries would go, in this quota entries here. Or you could do low log and just say, let people do their thing. So there you go. That's that. So I think that's really all I wanted to delve into for this chapter, I guess. I'd like to keep these short wherever possible, just because I know it's hard to watch them later if they're really, really long. So did either of you guys have questions? Dave, Dave's been putting questions in the chat. I'm sorry, I haven't been looking at that. So if I wanted a special file, I could create a shortcut and give people read and write, but not list folder contents, and they couldn't get there without the shortcut. List folder contents is more about what's contained within the file, Dave. So when I say list folder contents is a permission, if they have read and write but not list folder contents, let me see if I can show you this. It's kind of difficult to demonstrate because I don't have another VM that I can show you. But if I map the drive using another account, well, okay, that's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. So what I'll do is I'll sign in, or I'll remove list folder contents permissions from my file that I created here. So let's go ahead and set that setting. Let's go, permissions, and then we'll go to David and we'll say he does not have list folder contents as a permission. He has read and write, so he can create documents and put them in there, but he cannot see the documents that are inside that folder already. So now let's go ahead and throw a few documents in there. First of all, let's get rid of this. And we'll leave administrator. I guess I can't. So he's going to get it's going to defer to the lower permission for him. Actually, I believe we might need to deny him. We're not going to. Okay, so we're going to deny, specifically deny list folder contents. Oh, okay, if I do that, okay, there we go. We're not going to deny read. Yeah, okay, I guess it's not going to allow me that without. Okay, anyway, it should do that now because it's going to defer to the permissions that are the least with this particular user. Even though David is an administrator, it should defer to the lower permissions. So there's that. So let's click apply and okay. Now I'm going to sign in as that user. And he will be able to see it. Well, first of all, let's. Oh, you know what? That's not. We need to put it somewhere where he can actually get to it without a headache. So let's go ahead and cut and put this into. I'm going to put this folder into shares. How about that? Sure. So he can see it. It should maintain its permissions. Did not. Okay, so I got to re-add that permission. Okay, because of inheritance. I didn't turn off inheritance before I did that. Oops. If I had turned off inheritance, the benefit of inheritance is that it will maintain whatever permissions if you have it turned off when you move a file. But because I didn't, it inherited the permissions from the file that I put it into. Okay, so should have special permissions. Get rid of that. Oh, we're going to disable inheritance. Remove all inherited permissions, and then, yeah, that'll work. Administrator is going to have full control. But David only has, if we look at his permissions, he only has read and write. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the stuff contained in here. We have, obviously, list folder contents as a permission, so we can see what's in there. All kinds of documents. We're going to go ahead and put a few things in there just for fun. And we can see them just fine. Okay. So now let's go ahead and sign out of the administrator account here real quick. And we'll sign in as the other account. Sign in as David. Oops, password expired. Guess I never turned off that policy, which that is a group policy object in case you were wondering, which I believe is chapter 4, where we play around with group policy objects, or maybe it's later. So we haven't done that yet. So now let's go into the C drive and take a look at that folder that we had in here. That should not be giving me, did I forget to check the box for list folder contents? Let's see if I can even see the permissions here. Yeah, it shouldn't even, I don't know why it's because I'm an administrator, so I can't actually do that with this account because he has administrator access. He can do whatever he wants. So because I gave myself on this account the same access as any administrator, if I just had a generic user though, it wouldn't be able to even see the contents within that folder. Obviously, I shouldn't even be able to on this folder because of the fact that I don't have full control. I should not even be able to look at permissions here, but obviously because I'm an administrator, it doesn't matter. So I can change permissions all I want. So
Makes sense.
sadly, I can't demonstrate this because I don't have a user that's not an administrator, and I don't feel like actually doing that right now. But and then you say you can create a security group with just deny all, and then you can add a user who leaves to that group, but leave the other groups in place so that you can make their replacement gets make sure their replacement gets added to all of the same groups. What is that in reference to? Is that in reference to setting permissions? Is that what you're referring to, Dave? I'm not sure what you're saying there. For security groups, what are you saying though? You can create a security group with just deny all permissions, like deny full control. Is that what you're saying? And then add a user who leaves. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, so if somebody leaves the company, you could create a group that's specifically for the purpose of blocking them access to folder shares. Is that what you're getting at? Waiting for you in chat. Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. So there's a reason to use deny. I personally never use it. I mean, if a user leaves the company, you could just delete the account, and that would be essentially the same effect, so long as you have some kind of security policy in place. Whatever works. I mean, that's not a bad way of doing things. Sometimes you can't delete a user for different reasons. Sometimes you need to maintain that user's account because of things like Microsoft Exchange if you're running an Exchange server, and then changes department. That's a good example of this. Yeah, you could deny them permissions. Yeah, so I guess there's good reason to use the deny permission. I guess I've never found myself in a situation where it was necessary. So, but yeah. What about you, Eric? Do you have any questions for me?
My questions are more related to where I should be as far as progress goes in the class.
Well, we're going through chapter 5 now.
Okay.
You should be pretty close to finished. If you're done with chapter 5 by tomorrow, that would be a good place to be, because there's really only about 3 weeks left in class, and so it's coming down to the wire here, and there's about 3 chapters left. So I'm going to do probably 1 meeting a week for the next 3 weeks.
Okay.
And then we'll finish out the semester strong, hopefully. So.
Okay. So if I get chapter 5 done by tomorrow, I should be about caught up.
Yeah, you should be caught up. There's 3 chapters after that. So there's no 6. I didn't include anything from chapter 6, but there's 7, 8, and 11. So there's no 9 or 10 either. So 7, 8, and 11. It really these labs go quick when you just sit down and do them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just did 3 or 4 of the labs in about 20 minutes here, and it's very, very quick. You just they're step by step, follow the instructions, and then you should be fine.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. We're at about 40 minutes on the video, so I want to keep it kind of short for everybody. I need to pick up a word of the day for chapter 5. I've kind of given everybody the credit for the first 4 chapters, but after this, I'm going to not give out the credit for free. You got to actually watch the video and put in the word of the day. So the word of the day today, why don't we we'll make it quota. I'll make it quota. So I'll go and edit that right now, and then I'll give you 2 the points for it without you having to actually sign on and put in the word of the day. But anybody else will have to go ahead and put in quota. So you guys don't even need to bother. I'll give you guys the points. But all right. Anything else, Dave? I'll give you a second in the chat to punch in some information. Did I answer your question well enough earlier about list folder contents? List folder contents is, I can't demonstrate it because I don't have a non-administrator user to demo it, but did I answer the question well enough, Dave? All right, cool. Well, then I'm going to stop the meeting and we're good to go. I'll see you guys next week.
All right. See you
All
next week.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna figure it out.